champion, we did cut you. I cut you off a little bit earlier. We were talking about when you were growing up, and it takes a child. It takes a village to raise a child. And we were just talking off air, but this is such an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
When it comes to what a child should know at certain ages, let's pick an age. Let's say 6, school-going age, early school-going age, ECD. When it comes to a village raising a child, who really should get the say? Because mom, if it's a single-parent household, is at work, making money, etc. Where does the responsibility of each individual member of the village come in to have these conversations when there might be different ideas?
You know, when you asked me if you should speak about this on air, I was like, because there's a lot to unpack, you know, and especially if you're having the conversation about single mothers. Obviously, as a parent, the responsibility should lie with you, but unfortunately, because of the society that we live in, and if you're speaking about a village raising a child, it's everyone's responsibility that has agreed to raise that child. Because it's a community-based effort. And I think in terms of the information, we spoke about how parents are scared, especially single parents, especially girl mothers. They're scared because the world is a scary place. There is no place that is completely safe for women and girl children. So I think for most of my life, and I don't know about you, but I was just raised to be safe. And that's in my decisions, that's in how I go out in the street, that's in everything. We're raised to be safe, we're raised to survive. Because when we come into the world, like we say, in 2063, 300 years from now to reach gender equality, there's so many issues that have been perpetuated from generation to generation. And it's almost trying to, what I had to learn was to educate my mother about gender equality, to educate my mother about mental health, to educate her about the information that I have received as an adult now. So if she didn't have that information raising me, whose fault is that? Whose responsibility is that? So now that we are more informed, now that there are different platforms like these as well, it's important to expose children to that, but obviously within reason, because a 6-year-old can't be, you know, can't be seeing half the things that we're seeing, but it's important to have the conversations. If something big is happening in the world, same way you had to explain to your child, you should wear a mask, you should social distance, you should do this. Same way that you could explain COVID should be the same way that things like mental health should be explained. I mean, I read an interesting stat recently, I think a stat recently, I hope I'm not incorrect, but it said the youngest, the leading cause of death for children 10 to 29 is suicide. But we want to exclude children from that conversation. We want to exclude children from the conversation of mental health, where I was speaking to a psychologist last year on Mindful Mondays, and he said his youngest patient was 2 years old.
Yeah.
So how do we then exclude children from such important conversation, be it about their human rights, be it about their mental health, be it about sexual and reproductive health, be it about gender-based violence, be it about teaching them how to say no when they don't want to do something, consent. There's so many things that we exclude them from, and only later when they're like in their 20s and we look back and you realize that they were sponges when they were 6.
So much has already been done.
Yeah.
And we're talking about children now, but also in the context of the greater society. I just wonder, because, I mean, you come from a background that is rich in religious beliefs, cultural belief systems, traditional belief system, not only in South Africa or in Venda, but in the continent. You know, Africa is rich when it comes to traditional beliefs. How do you plan to maneuver such a region as the champion while having to deal with traditional leaders who will tell you, Shudu, when it comes to this community and this part, we believe in this. Perhaps patriarchy, men are leaders, women don't have a say. When it comes to this specific grouping, we believe in this, religious belief that may not necessarily support, what you stand for, advocating for women's rights. So how do you plan on maneuvering those challenges in the continent?
The task is daunting, but luckily I have a great team behind me, the UNFPA team. But I think one thing that I have learned because of where I come from, because of how I've had to engage people at home, be it my mother, be it my grandfather, be it my aunts, be it people around me, is to approach everything with kindness and respect. Because I think for the most part, there are so many structures that have been in place even before we were born, especially where religion and culture are concerned. But conversation with respect and kindness is so important.
Yeah.
It may not take a day. It may take a year of engagement, finding compromise. but eventually, someone will listen. I always believe that someone will listen and someone will hear what we're trying to say. But I think most of the time when we're trying to change things or we're trying to tell people what the right way is, we don't always do it with respect and with kindness. And I'm not saying we should respect structures that disempower women or children, no. But what I'm saying is when we engage on these things, yes, we need to understand what is there first. And from that understanding, find a way forward from there, because I can't just go there now, just start without understanding what 300 years of their culture and religion has been, you know. I think in order to make an informed opinion, you actually need to listen to what the other person needs to say. And I believe when trying to find African solutions to African problems, we need to make sure that the people on the ground are active participants of that, because if they're not, there is no sustainable way forward. So everyone needs to be in conversation, everyone needs to be in agreement, and when there is no agreement, compromise.
As we start saying goodbye, and we're talking about compromise, there's a lot of talk of what is supposed to be done as we start saying goodbye. Campaigns to get this on the road. What's the first campaign you're involved in? What are you planning? Let us into your little secret black book of planning for a moment, and then what's your message for the 16 days of activism as well? But from here, where are we going to see you first doing exactly what we're talking about?
Okay, I just have to say, when I say compromise, for those that we're going to be engaging with, we don't compromise on human rights or the rights of women and girls. Compromise in conversation and finding a way forward. And with that being said, it's in the conversations, 16 days of activism, GBV. GBV is such an important topic, and as we said in the beginning, it's not just 16 days. It needs to be every day of the year until solutions are found. So one of the first things I'm doing, I actually did something yesterday with the New York office on having different ways of dealing with gender-based violence, even when words fail us. I mean, images like this is activism, and that's one of the campaigns that I'm involved in. Or over and above that, there's a few things in the pipeline, but I've got this thing where I try to not speak about things until they finalize, but mental health is the biggest conversation. I started with it in 2020. And I plan to continue with it because, like you're saying, you said we're in crisis mode, right? I read something so interesting last year that said mental health is the silent pandemic, where we went through 2 years, you know, of anxiety and so many other mental illnesses. I read, sorry, I do a lot of reading. Another stat that said depressive disorders and anxiety increased by 25%.
Because of COVID?
Not just because it was exacerbated, but yes, because of COVID. But these conversations are not being had. You know, we lived in a state of just constant fear. Is it me? Is it my loved one?
Right.
What's going to happen next? And also the interesting stat that I told you about children. So mental health is still a conversation that needs to be at the forefront of any recovery mechanism, you know, because we tend to look at the outside. As long as you look fine, I'm going to assume that you're fine.
Right.
In terms of giving you aid or humanitarian assistance, as long as you look fine, we assume that you're fine. But mental health, as we've seen over the years, is silent. And only once we start the conversation, we normalize the conversation, remove the stigma, can we then move forward and actually recover properly as a society and breed a society that has self-awareness.
Right.
Because the mind is the powerhouse.
Remove the stigma and peel away the layers, I suppose. And it looks like you're well on your way to do that. So, Shudu, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All the best of the
Thank you
campaign.
so
You're going to
much.
be very, very busy. I'm not sure if I want to give that fancy title just one more time. It's just so much fun to read.
got
Can I read it
this.
again?
Yeah.
United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency Regional Champion.
That's right.
And we wish you all the best for
All
a
the
Christmas.
best.
I know you're going to be busy over Christmas
Yes.
and next year as well. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. I'll see you guys soon.
Yes, yes, you will. Yes, you will, definitely. Shudufhadzo Musida joining us right here on the South African Morning. Lots